This is Getting the Mecha, the weekly anime and manga show where we take things one step further. I analyze everything from arcs to OPs to episodes in my wacky but enjoyable quest to make sense of all of it. Welcome back to Getting the Mecha. I'm your host Jamal today, and in today's episode, we are analyzing mecha anime once again. In today's episode, I want to talk about, and this is probably going to be the most big or maybe the most controversial thing I've spoken about on the podcast, and that is analyzing the argument that mecha anime is dead. Sadly, this argument has popped up once again, and this episode isn't particularly a critique to a certain creator or anything like that, but I just thought it would be a great time to talk about it now that it's within general discussion right now, or kind of at the moment. So this episode isn't particularly an angry response, it's just my opinion in regards to the topic and what it says about our media culture, because I think there are a few things to take from that. What it says about our media culture, the media landscape, the anime landscape, and a few more things. If you do enjoy this episode of the podcast, it would be lovely if you left Getting the Mecha a review, whether that's on Apple Podcasts or your podcast service of choice. And without further ado, here is the episode for this week. That is episode 60 of Getting the Mecha. And I did forget to say, it has been officially 1 year of Getting the Mecha. So thank you very much for that. Not really going to be doing anything for 1 year, but thank you again. So without further ado, here is the episode for this week. That is episode 60 of Getting the Mecha. Mecha Isn't Dead. As always on Getting the Mecha, before we get into the episode, I like to give you some potential alerts or warnings in regards to spoilers and stuff. And in this case, there shouldn't be any spoilers for this episode. I will be speaking about Evangelion in reference to this, as Evangelion is one of the main anime I discuss on this podcast and analyze on this podcast. So I think it is important that I do talk about it, but it won't be in a level of detail that will be giving away the plot in case you haven't seen it, or to that extent to which it won't really spoil it for you. So the Mecha Is Dead argument is a very interesting one. It's one which has come up multiple times. I don't really know if interesting is the way to define it actually, but it's a rather polarizing one because often people seeing it from the outside, or maybe with a bit less detail and context, often do use it to say, based on the amount of titles the mecha has had in the recent decade or so, that mecha is declining, or they'll take that to the logical conclusion, as some of us do in the community, and suggest that mecha is dead. On the surface, I think this argument potentially holds true, or it looks as if it holds true, but I think the argument can be refuted when multiple factors or a very specific thing is taken into context when we consider the purpose and life, I put that in quotation marks, of our media and the current climate and the climates of before when it comes to the media landscape and anime. This episode will essentially be my stance or counter-argument in relation to this idea that mecha is dead or declining, because I think, although yes, I said from the surface that this makes sense, but I think using this statement is kind of taking into account one side of things, a numerical side of things, but not really taking into account how the media works and what the media really means, and overall the power of anime and the media. I also do want to say that this episode doesn't particularly end when it comes to Mecha Is Dead. I think Mecha Is Dead is an argument which is only a subsection of a very larger debate about our media and media culture. We can insert any sort of genre into the Is Dead formula, but I think what is really important is the idea of calling a piece of media or a genre or part of our media dead, because what does that imply? And more specifically, what does it ignore, which we'll be talking about today? This notion that mecha is dead or declining often suggests that mecha to some extent doesn't have much going for it anymore in today's climate of anime. And the way this is assessed and judged from this perspective is through quantity. It's assessed through the fact that there haven't been many or too many mecha titles, but we'll kind of get into that because that is relative in itself. That's kind of where the argument already has problems, but one often judges or makes a statement on the basis that there are not so many mecha anime that they know of that are being produced this decade or recently. Again, I kind of say that all in quotation marks. As I've kind of alluded to multiple times, if we're to look at it in this very numerical sense, they potentially do have a point. But immediately, even as I was saying this, I have problems with this. As I said in my mid-year review in regards to what I learned about anime, which kind of ended up being what I learned about myself and my tastes in relation to anime. But anyway, when it came to that review, one thing which I said, and something which I still stand by now, is that I think it is a bit weird, personally, to judge a subjective experience with some sort of objective framework. And I understand there are objective factors to art, but those are very number-based and things that don't really incorporate judgment. So for example, an aspect ratio. If we take Kizumonogatari, that is in the aspect ratio of 2.35 to 1. That is an objective factor of said film. But when judging the experience, it's really weird, I think, to put it within some sort of objective framework or something which is more ingrained within reason. And in this case, suggesting an anime genre is dead by using a numerical system to prove so. I think that kind of misses the point of art or the nature of art per se. Using a number to measure quality will infinitely lack the detail and nuance which comes with art, and that's why I think that in order to try and gain one sort of bearing when it comes to art, I'm no expert and it's only my opinion in relation to it, but that is where thoughts come in, and that's why discourse and discussion is important, rather than trying to put a number on everything and draw conclusions from numbers, because that isn't how we recognize quality. And as a result, that misses out on the complexity of said pieces, in this case, the mecha genre. I also dislike this because it's the fact that it only uses this system of quote-unquote reason to suggest something is dead. It's a similar idea to when we get debates on, oh, an anime is longer so it must be better, right? It doesn't really work like that. Quantity, it's a very basic argument that goes back to almost every other debate you've had, that quantity does not equal quality. And it's interesting because we often use that in adverse to an argument like Mecha Is Dead. We often use this argument to say that when something is in large quantities, that it isn't particularly better. We use it almost as a limiter to ensure that our judgments aren't defined by reason, because judgments were never reasonable or rational in the first place. And it's weird how we don't necessarily apply that to the Mecha Is Dead idea, because in this case it holds true that quantity does not equal quality. And no, I'm not particularly pulling the Netflix generation argument. Often that is used to call people out for them being swept away by 21st century streaming and media culture. That, oh yeah, because they're so ingrained in the numbers and quantity and such. And I'm not really pulling that. That's often used to kind of offend people or suggest that they're just very zoomery, which I am. But I think there's definitely a case to say that the media landscape and means of consumption has changed, and as a result, our perception of the media and the anime landscape has changed alongside it. And hence, I propose the argument that it isn't particularly mecha that is dead, but our means of viewing the media would suggest that something is in decline. But that isn't particularly true, or I don't believe that that's the case. It's just because there's been a shift in mindset in regards to what is mainstream and what is not, as well as what is popular and what is not, and what does popular mean for a piece of anime or a genre of anime. I think I can say confidently that the media landscape has most definitely changed, and this is particularly anime as well. We have many anime coming out per season, but some genres have most definitely not necessarily been what you can define as favored by the system, or at least aren't necessarily at the forefront of this new seasonal system of pumping out tens and tens of anime per season. There's also another side to this as well in the case of anime streaming. That's also a very big part of the entire landscape as well. Especially when we live in an age of exclusivity where said company will want to license an anime only for their company, or will produce an anime just for them, or they'll work with other companies in order to make this happen. We see it now with Crunchyroll originals, we see it with Netflix originals, and we just have a lot of licensing battles going on throughout the years. Anime streaming as well has just become a bit more solid as of now, as what it was, say, 15 years ago. If we take all the multiple services that now stream anime, such as Crunchyroll, Funimation, Netflix, HiDive, Hulu, Anime Lab, Amazon Prime, and I'm sure there are even some more in there that I'm not mentioning that probably have anime or something. This isn't particularly a numbers game, but what my emphasis is really is that the stage has changed, and we're at a stage where we have to essentially filter out the noise for ourselves. We have to make choices within this market of anime, almost. I don't really mean market in its like political sense, but anyway, we have to filter out noise and choose what we want to watch and spend time with across, say, 12 or 25 weeks if you watch it like that, or just make a commitment as to the anime that you're going to watch which are newer this year, or newer from the past few years. That's all with the assumption that you watch seasonal anime, but even so, if you don't, there is a degree of filtration which goes through our media decisions, because that's what we do, and that we choose what we like, we choose what we think interests us. I do think this change to an extent is being a bit inevitable. I don't particularly agree with all the things behind it because of the multiple things which come with it, such as the treatment of animators and what it does for production and what it does for those behind production, and a lot of other things which are too long to explain in a podcast alone like this. But I think the idea of filtering the noise and what the consumer has to do is natural. It's what I do on a regular basis. I choose what I'm going to watch because it's what I want to watch. We're coerced by our desires, and so we do it. It's essentially a natural way of coping with the landscape. It's not really possible to watch every anime per year. But what really bothers me is the effect that this has had on the discussion when it comes to either mecha anime or just anime as a whole. And that's the idea of the quote-unquote mainstream and how that has adapted with the landscape. I sadly believe that the notion of the mainstream has surpassed its, what you can say, original definition, if you kind of agree that there is a definition here. It's kind of weird because when we talk about art and subjectivity and then I bring in a definition which is suggested objective, it gets a bit tricky. But for the sake of argument, if we call this the original definition, which is something which is mainstream implies its popularity, something gets into the mainstream because we give it the recognition to become that. Any anime which wasn't watched that many times wouldn't really enter the mainstream per se. But what I think has happened is that it's gone much further than popularity and has now encompassed output as well. An anime or anime genre which comes out a lot is seen as in the mainstream and current, and it's doing well, versus something which isn't particularly in the mainstream isn't doing so well. And that's partially because this idea the mainstream has shrunken down, since now with more anime out we have to filter the noise even more, and so anything that doesn't make that top window or top shelf is seen as not particularly doing so well. It's not coming out so much, it's not really reaching the forefront or the front lines, and hence it's seen as declining or at least suffering to some extent. But I don't really think that is what suffering or media decline really is. Whether media can decline is also another question, but I think to assume it from that kind of misses the point then again. I think this arguable expansion of the definition due to people suggesting that something is declining because of lesser output is somewhat dangerous for our media culture and kind of undermines anime generally. In order for us to get really into this, I think it's good to put this into context, and I'm not particularly the most qualified mecha person. I'll be completely honest there. I haven't seen awful amounts of mecha anime like some of my podcast counterparts, or podcaster counterparts and creator counterparts. I'm still admittedly easing myself into the genre, but I think there is one thing which I can talk about a bit more comfortably, and something which I think I have a bit more of a right to discuss, because it is one of the main emphases of this podcast, and that is Neon Genesis Evangelion. So let's put it in the context of Evangelion to kind of understand what I'm talking about, or for you to get what I really mean. Hideaki Anno's Neon Genesis Evangelion, an anime released in the fall of 1995, is known for various reasons today. One of these is its thrilling existential themes encoded within its narrative, concerning children who are piloting these EVA units or mechas in order to defend Tokyo 3, while simultaneously questioning their own existence and their place within the world, attempting to understand it through combat and other means. Proven through insane and almost an endless amount of analyses on the internet and just generally, whether that's on YouTube, whether that's podcasters like myself and others, whether that's blog posts and articles and so many other means of analyzing this anime. But the point is that this proves that there are so many things we can take from Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I've even learned that myself doing this podcast. It's not particularly a competition or anything, and it's not also to say that other pieces of media don't have anything or have questions attached to them, but Evangelion for me is another breed, in the sense that it feels like there's an entire novel worth of questions and readings and just other ways of digging into the series. Each episode alone has masses of questions to ask and think about, just so much food for thought, whether that's about Hideaki Anno's approach to storyboarding and directing, whether that's in regards to animation and such. But what I am trying to say really is that there's a subculture which comes with Neon Genesis Evangelion. It's a life of the text which exists outside the text alone. In the case of EVA, it's this analysis culture, and it's the case that even though we do have the rebuilds, EVA came out in 1995, and I'm not particularly talking about its influence on anime per se, but it's the fact that EVA still lives today. Lives also comes very subjectively, but what I am trying to say is that it supersedes any notion of output, which has become the new idea of the mainstream today. But Evangelion, as I said, still lives, and it's the fact that it hasn't needed to be pumped out and such, since the text is so magical in itself and has so much value in itself. Evangelion, I think, is just a really powerful anime for me, and that partially is because of what it does in the animation department. For example, Mitsuo Iso's cuts in the end of Evangelion have been some of the most magical things I've seen. They're still looked at in awe today by not just me, but many other Zaka fans, and the reason for that is just Iso is able to capture this human-like sense weight which comes within these EVAs, and I haven't ever seen it before. Often mechas are seen as these cold beings, or we can't even call them beings. It's the idea that I am calling an EVA a being, which really makes this interesting. There's a weight and aggression which comes out of Asuka's fight when in this combat scene, creating this human element which often mechas lack. I've also been looking into animators like Takeshi Honda, for example, who seem to have their own interesting quirks and takes on animation and really create this sense of aggression and struggle. I've been calling it the Honda struggle because in the context of 24 FPS, essentially what Honda will do is that he will animate in ones, which is a unique drawing for every frame which is passed. So there'll be a unique drawing in 24 FPS which anime is in. And he uses this in order to create this very shaky look for the Evas when they're getting up and when they're struggling for power, and it looks really, really good. But if I get back on track, what am I trying to say overall? What I'm trying to say is that the Mecha Is Dead argument undermines standing power and these things which come with mecha anime, or any other anime if we just put it in the context of said genre is dead. What I basically described is why Evangelion, in my opinion, is a timeless anime. Because there are just so many things which we question, and there have been so many anime afterwards which don't necessarily have that, and that is where Eva has its space in history for me. But what is really more important, or my main emphasis here, is that Neon Genesis Evangelion or any other anime has the potential to live outside of its very text alone. The fact that many quote-unquote popular, although we are kind of debating the word popular in this context, but for the sake of argument, the fact that many popular mecha anime that came out a decade ago are still so fresh in some people's memories, or many people's memories, is because they have an element of standing power. And that is what I think the Mecha Is Dead argument really doesn't consider, or doesn't really look at all. Whether that's the many Gundam series of the 21st century, whether that's Evangelion, whether that's Code Geass, Gurren Lagann, Eureka 7, Full Metal Panic, I could go on for a while, but the reason why these are so appreciated up till now, and why I suggest Mecha Isn't Dead, is that if we view this idea that the media only survives or quote-unquote lives because of only output, we ignore standing power, and we ignore the power and legacy of the media and that sort of life cycle that it has also. The idea that media stays afloat based on output alone or exclusively misses a good half of the beauty of media. Its existence within a market isn't only defined by quantity, but it's heavily defined by how it resonates with us, the emotions which are evoked from our experiences, and the emotions which I described in the case of Neon Genesis Evangelion, for example, or the experiences which you had with, although I don't know who you are specifically, but the experiences you had with Code Geass, or Gundam Seed, or Iron-Blooded Orphans, or whatever, are what give the media the power it has to kind of go beyond time and not be stifled by time particularly. The beauty of media, and something that won't particularly change despite the changing landscape, is that it has the ability to have impact and survive and have meaning and resonate with people despite time and despite its output within this very fast production system, or very polluted almost production system which we live in today in regards to anime. I think this is a debate which goes a lot further than mecha anime itself, but what life is in relation to the media, and what the life of a media product particularly means. I think it's very hard to call a media product dead, as it's not particularly a contest of volume and numbers, but it's really what does it do for its audience, and how does one feel when watching it. Those feelings are ones which transcend time and aren't limited by the next thing which is coming out. Your experience with Aeon Exorcist isn't completely erased by your experience with Fire Force 10 years down the line, for example. The media, despite it moving so fast, isn't something which is so replicable. It's not a complete... Ideas don't completely replace themselves when it comes to the media. Yes, the media evolves and it takes ideas from previous pieces of media, but that isn't to say that the media prior to it is dead, because it's now not current anymore. The beauty of the media products we love is that many of them are multifaceted and full of depth. The depth of Neon Genesis Evangelion is one which, as I said, transcends time and isn't limited by the current landscape of today. And that goes for every single anime out there, mecha or not. And so kind of just to conclude, I think to kind of summarize on what the Mecha Is Dead argument really implies, and what it really misses out, is that it undermines the power of the media as well as the recognition it deserves. I personally don't think a genre should only be recognized by its latest counterparts or how much of it is coming out, but really what has the media within its genre done for the entire meta, the meta being anime. judging media based on output makes it really stale, because that kind of only narrows our scope as to what the media really is. And the media and anime isn't only what is at the forefront or what is on the front page of Mao, but it's everything. Anime is everything, from the very first anime made in nitrocellulose up to now, and the new things which are coming out, and the new things which are still in production and haven't been announced yet. That is all anime, and I think we need to become more comfortable, or at least those who argue this need to become a lot more comfortable with anime as a whole, as opposed to what is only at the forefront. And so that is the analysis for this week. Thank you for listening. It has been, if you can't tell, a very stressful one to do. I'm rather nervous doing this because I'm trying to maybe not get things wrong, as well as just try and make the point as potentially effective as possible. And so I hope you did enjoy this episode, or this analysis. However, the episode is not over. Here is the In the Moment segment for this week, talking about something which I've been watching lately. If you are new to the In the Moment segment, it's very simple. All I do is I talk about one or so anime or manga which I've been watching or reading lately. And in today's episode, I will actually be talking about an anime because in the previous episodes, I kind of admitted that I haven't been watching much anime and why that isn't the case. But while I was on my week off, and while I was also editing some episodes and such, I actually managed to watch quite a lot. I'm not going to go through all of it, but one thing which I really want to cover is Digimon. Digimon, and I'll kind of just spill out my childhood here, isn't something which I really had much of in my childhood. Anime on UK TV existed, but it wasn't really much of a thing for me, and besides the basic things here and there, like Yu-Gi-Oh! And Pokemon and such, Digimon wasn't really a big thing, and I'm pretty sure I learned about Digimon in the middle of primary school. I'm like, wait, what's that? And as soon as I heard Mon, I thought that it was a Pokemon ripoff right away. Obviously, I don't think that now because I watched it and oh wow, I'm really impressed. So Digimon's kind of been a thing which I've known of for a while now, but I didn't really pursue it. I don't know why, but I kind of just stayed away from it all this time. I think it was because of those childhood memories of thinking that it was some sort of rip-off or enemy of Pokemon or something like that. But now I actually recently had my first experience with Digimon, and I started with the two Mamoru Hosoda Digimon films. That's the Digimon Adventure movie, as well as I believe the O2 movie, which is Children's War Game. And I had a lot of fun, and I think these are two of my favorite Hosoda films so far. I have been kind of getting through the Hosoda catalog. I've seen Summer Wars, I've seen Boy and the Beast, I've seen these two Digimon films. I've seen One Piece movie 6 as well, so that's about 5 Hosoda films. I still do have The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, there's Wolf Children, and I think there are a few more, but I think I've finished most of the main director's catalog, and so I'm kind of getting to judging Hosoda's films as a whole, but I'm just gonna leave it at Digimon for this episode. And I really did enjoy watching these two films. I did watch some films which are not by Hosoda, but they're still Digimon, and at a similar time, I honestly did forget the director, but I will get back to that. But at least for the two Hosoda films, I think what I really enjoy about Hosoda's take on Digimon, and kind of his take on films which aren't originals, no offense, but I think the reason for that is that he doesn't have to do a lot of contextualizing and create these systems within the films. What I prefer about Children's War Game to Summer Wars, and the reason why I just prefer the film outright more to its counterpart, which is inspired by Children's War Game, Summer Wars, is the fact that we already know how Digimon works, and we already understand its systems and logic and how it all works and such. And Summer Wars has to kind of make reason and sense for all this happening. It has to create this system of the internet and how everything's linked together and how we have all these other things going on. Digimon, we already know how this works. We already know about the computer system and such, and it kind of just gets right to the point. And I think the intensity and lack of context which comes from it really makes for a very intense film, seeing children try their absolute best to stop a missile from hitting the earth which is actually a lot darker than I thought for a Digimon thing. And then in the case of Digimon Adventure, the first movie, it's just as the events get bigger and bigger, we see these Digimon get bigger and bigger, and it just gets really crazy and a lot more tense than what I once thought it would be. I think my opinion of Hosoda as a director has definitely improved over the course of One Piece Movie 6 as well as these two Digimon films. There are still more to go, and I do know Wolf Children is pretty respected, and so I guess I'll see how that goes when I eventually watch that. I am watching some other films at the moment. I'm watching Shinkai a bit. I did watch 5 centimeters per second not too long ago, which was okay. I also saw Mobile Suit Gundam 1, the film version, which was also pretty good, and I did enjoy quite a lot. Basically, I have been getting through more films. I'm in my very film mode at the moment. There was a time which I kind of had a film mode a few months back, but now I'm really in that state again to kind of only watch films and not series for now. Although I am considering watching a few things for fun like Get Robo Armageddon. I need to finish Tsurune, Isaacan, and so many other things, but I'm not going to get too into that because that is the end of the In the Moment segment for this week. Let me not get too carried away. Digimon is good. That's in summary. If you just wanted to tell a friend what this week's In the Moment segment was about, Digimon is good. I'm gonna watch more of it, and I'm gonna watch the final Digimon film as well, because that was really cool, and looks really cool even. But that is the segment for this week. Let's just go to some closing thoughts, and I'll kind of wrap up my argument, and some takeaways you can get from my stance on the idea that Mecha is dead, even though I don't believe it's dead. In summary, the Mecha Is Dead argument kind of relies on this notion that output is what makes an anime popular, what allows it to enter the mainstream. And sadly, anything that isn't within that field of view isn't really seen as valuable because it's in this state of decline. And in the case of mecha anime, it's defined to be in this state of decline according to the argument. However, I fundamentally disagree with the notion that output is what makes anime kind of have relevance, and this idea of chasing relevance based on what is at the forefront is what I really disagree with. The media for me is something which transcends time and isn't particularly limited by entering the mainstream or being at the forefront of said piece of media or meta. What I think is of a lot more value is the standing power of said piece of media. In the case of Neon Genesis Evangelion, I think the reason why it is so popular and still so popular is that it exists outside of the text itself, and there are many other anime which manage to do this, some which are in the mecha genre, in this case Gundam for example. Massive culture that exists outside of Gundam. Gundam doesn't stay restricted to itself, and I can say the same for Eva as well, whether that's through its analysis culture, whether that's through the animation discussion and many other things. I think this debate does stem further than just mecha anime, but the life of media products in general and the changing landscape which we're in today. The beauty of a meta or medium like anime is the fact that it manages to transcend time as it's full of depth, and many anime, particularly mecha anime, are oozing with this level of depth, whether that's in relation to its themes on existentialism, whether it's commentary on war, and so many other themes I could get into. Essentially, the media isn't defined by time or output, and so it isn't particularly mecha that is dead. But our understanding of the media and the very landscape itself has changed. Thank you for listening to this episode of Get in the Mecha. That has been episode 60 of the show. Thank you very much for listening. I don't really have much to say for this ending part right here. I just hope you have a good day, really. Hopefully you enjoy this weekend. Hopefully Get the Mecha is a good kickstart to your weekend too. I was kind of nervous for this episode, I'll be honest. Be sure to tell me what you think about the episode, whether that's on Twitter, whether that's a comment on my blog, whether that's an email to getinthemecha@gmail.com. By the way, Twitter is @getinthemecha. Feel free to follow the page. I talk about animation, I talk about the podcast, I talk about a bit about anime history-ish, sometimes here and there. I did talk about Daikon recently, and mostly those sort of things, really. But thank you for listening to episode 60 of Guess the Mecha. Have a great weekend. Have a great month. We are getting through 2020 and we will get through it together, whether that's through this podcast or elsewhere. I have been your host, Jamal, today, and this has been Get in the Mecha. The music in this production goes as follows: 8-bit title screen by Joth, Mandatory Overtime by Joth, and Difference by Chasers Gaming.